session of the Nelson County Board of Education today, September 5th, 2019, at 5:31 p.m. Okay. Are there any changes to the agenda?
No changes.
Brad? Okay, thank you. Under general fund tax levy, that would be Miss Owens, the lucky lady.
I told you to see me again soon. So,
We're going to combine the tax levy and the working budget conversation into one, since they really work off each other.
that's what I was getting ready to say. So, we're going to do one. So the first thing, after receiving our property assessments, we're going to be recommending the 4% plus exonerations, which will reduce our tax rate from 77.2 in 2019 to 75.3 for fiscal year 2020. There's a bunch of things going on in the background, and that's going to feed our working budget discussion, so I'm going to go ahead and discuss what those are. The first thing is typically our assessments go up by about $100 million to $125 million a year, which is high. And we were given preliminary numbers for $175 million, which is what we planned for. The problem is we are capped at 4% revenue increase. We had a tax rate increase of $300 million, which was much closer to a 7% increase, and SEEK does not cap their effect on us. So what the first thing that's going to happen is, because our assessments went up so much, our local effort also goes up, and we are expecting a $900,000 decrease in SEEK revenue. The next thing that's happened.
So simple put on that one, because local property values go up, the state formula that's used kind of works in inverse. I mean, whenever SEEK was implemented back 30 years ago, it was on that premise of, if locally the property values can support more funding, then the state will give less, versus in parts of Kentucky, like eastern Kentucky in particular, where the property values were so low and couldn't support education, the state said we'll give more in those communities.
Correct, and because they're not capped at decreasing us by 4%, we get a much larger decrease than we get an increase this year. The other thing that's happened is, because the first 15 cents of our tax rates go to the building fund, FSBK, that is also not capped at 4%. So what that means is half of what we will get automatically goes there.
Just 10%, so went up 10% in FSPK.
Yes.
And that, again, that's a state formula that every district is faced with, but it sounds like it hits communities like ours disproportionately whenever there's a huge property value increase within the community.
Yes, we have additional nickels. Every district has the 1 nickel. We have 3 nickels. So it is very disproportionate for us this year, because even though our revenue is increased by 4%, the increase to that fund is not capped at 4%. So we've given you a little bit of a summary. So the state has estimated that our property tax revenue, based on 4% in exonerations, would be $19.9 million, but we only collect about 97.5%. So what we would expect to collect would be the $19.4 million, which is only an increase of about $865,000. But then we have an increase of $420,000 for FSPK that doesn't get to come to the general fund. It goes to the building fund, so that's going to work against us in our general fund. Then our tax collection fees, those are all paid out of the general fund regardless of where all the money goes, so that hits us in the general fund as well, resulting in an increase to the general fund of only $413,000.
One positive red there.
Working against us.
So I'm sorry, real quick, then the tax collection fee, that's what the Nelson County Sheriff's Office charges us,
To collect the
because by law we're required to use them to collect it. And what, do you know off the top of your head?
2.2%.
You knew where I was going, so 2.2, okay.
And they can charge a minimum of 1.5%. I believe the maximum is 4%.
4, I was thinking.
So.
Which is a little bit different, because I know like the city schools, they collect their own taxes, but the legislature allowed independent schools to have that choice, which we don't.
That's correct. So then you can see state SEEK revenue. We're going to drop from $13,485,000 to $12,585,000, resulting in a decrease in our general fund of $900,000, resulting in a total decrease from our fiscal year 2019 revenue the fiscal year 2020 revenue of $285,000. What causes an additional problem is because we based our original tentative budget projection on the $175 million increase, we based our tentative budget on $32,985,000, but we are only going to get $32,290,000. So, basically, you can see how that plays out here. By the on the tentative budget, it's a guesstimate based on the information we have. I told you last time that we don't have all the numbers, we don't have our assessments, we don't have actual salary rates for new people and things like that. So we base it on our best guess. And then by the working budget, we have all the details. Now we have all the details. And so at this point, we will be working to take this original budget that you were given and looking to see where we can trim, because we are going to have $700,000 less. So that conversation is happening, multiple people involved. Over the next week or so, we will have that final munis budget for you at the munis one, and I'll give you a new summary at the board meeting. But this is where we are, and this is why we will be recommending the 75.3, which is 4% plus exoneration, but is a reduction in the tax rate.
And this, I mean, this is also similar like to what I believe I read the Nelson County Fiscal Court discovered this year, in that their tax rate also was going to go down, yet they were also going to be taking the 4% revenue. And it all is based on the fact, it sounds like, that whether it's the TVA's office here reevaluated property, or there was new property being built, or
so your 4% is only based on pre-existing property.
Okay.
It's not based on new property.
Okay.
So they do it in, I think we do it in 5 different sections in our county, and so each year one section of the county
It's
is
supposed to
reevaluated.
be, reassessed, okay.
Yes. So this is based on the section of the county that they reassessed this year, which I don't know which section that was. She had given us a drawn map last year, but it was colored in, and
I
you
remember reading something in the local media about potentially even some of the property hadn't been reassessed in almost a decade.
always a possibility.
Yeah.
TDA's always said that they're very short-staffed and don't have the people
Sure.
to go out.
So what it boils down to is, even though we have the opportunity to take the 4% revenue increase, yet if someone's home didn't change value, their school portion of their property tax will go down
If they're not
because of that
gonna
right
change
there.
value. That's
Yeah. We are still, as a school district, going to be in a hole because of the state's formula that they use, which says if you can afford to pay more locally, we're going to give you less from the state.
They cap you at 4%,
Yeah.
they don't cap the seats or the FSTK increase.
And in fact, let me ask this too, because then there'll be people that may question, well, then let's just show them we can't pay more, so let's just not do a revenue increase locally. That's not how the state
That is
seat
not,
formula
it's
works.
based on the assessment, not
Yeah.
our tax rate.
Yeah, so the state would still say, even if we said, let's keep things flat, not take in any more revenue, the 18,596 and change last year is also going to be the same this year, the state would still say, way down there, third from the bottom.
This amount would stay the same, this amount would stay the same.
Mhm.
Actual loss to the district would be closer to $1 million,
Yeah.
and the actual decrease from our budgeted would be close to $1.5 million.
Because that third from the bottom, the state seek revenue would still have a minus $900,000 in it. They wouldn't go, oh, well, since you all didn't take as much as you could locally, we'll make that up for you at the state. They're still going to say, well, that's your problem locally.
That's correct.
Here's the good news, is that we planned last year to make decisions that fed our priorities.
Yeah.
Fed schools, their needs, put students first. We increased salaries for all employees. We did all the things we felt were right to do. We didn't have all the data. Good. It's good news that we didn't have all the data, because we probably wouldn't have been able to do all those things. So we made all those decisions. Now, we also thankfully have a little bit of wiggle room from our increase in contingency that we pulled forward. Not gonna offset all this. And I think our reality is we made good decisions. We're gonna be okay. And it's gonna continue to force us to make good decisions this year. And that's where we are.
And the reason why, I mean, I'm focusing so much on this is because it is such an easy thing for the average person in the community that doesn't deal with property tax rates and school district budgets every day to misunderstand and think, oh, well, they're taking that 4% tax hike again. And they think, well, that means my property taxes are going to go up. This is an example right here, a perfect example that several times we've talked about where mathematically it can actually work in inverse depending upon the overall value of property in the community. So, I mean, I just want to continue to stress, we've got a very unique opportunity here that the tax rate, the 77.2 cents per $100 of value, can go down to 75.3 cents per $100 of value, yet it still allows the school district to be able to have a 4% revenue, extra revenue. But also in this case, it kind of works against us because the state's going to say, well, we're going to give you even less than we thought originally.
Yeah.
That's correct.
So it could be worse.
Yes.
We could have had 100, or we could have had $1 billion increase. Then we would have been offset another 900,000 in sick money.
Sure, sure.
In worship.
If the local assessment does not occur, like you theorized a second ago, how does the state get their $900,000 figure?
Because they give you a forecast for Sept based on your trends. We had actually, so they based it on the trends, we had actually based the budget on a higher number because we had been given a preliminary number. They hadn't finished the assessment. So then Sept will give you a forecast and they'll give you a tentative and then they give you a final amount once they get the assessment.
And part of the challenge with this, I know Superintendent Bradley and I have talked about this a few times. So, you know, the SEEK, this concept of SEEK and supporting local districts with state funding was birthed out of the Kentucky Education Reform Act back in the late 80s and the early 90s whenever there were lawsuits where the more poorer, lower property value parts of the state said, we're not being treated fair.
Right, they were trying to level
Yeah,
the playing field.
and it
They were trying
did.
to do, it's the model that's
For a while.
just-
It worked those first few years, but what hasn't happened is that the SEEK formula has not been revisited through the years. And in fact, I've heard for 15 plus years in Frankfurt that we need to rework that SEEK formula, and nobody really wants to touch it.
Because they don't understand the first one.
And part of it is because from a legislative approach, they really don't understand that first one, but then also, if they change that, what does that mean for them as a legislator, and does it look good or bad, and are they maybe causing people to get up in arms because all of a sudden there's going to be even more money to spend at the state level? I mean, it becomes a very political conversation, which it should be more about making sure we fully fund public schools, but.
That slide that you had up there where it was, keep going, that one right there, where you were talking about maybe some changes in.
This was the tentative budget
Yeah.
one.
So will we see that?
I will summarize it for you for
Okay.
the board meeting.
The 47 pager.
Well, and I have to give you the 47 pager, you have to approve that one, but this one will
But
be
this one will
summarized,
be
we'll have a
summary.
summary.
Okay, good.
With different numbers.
With different numbers.
Okay.
With different numbers. Okay?
I do have a suggestion though at our tax meeting.
Yes, ma'am.
You probably need to rewind and say exactly what you just said.
Say it all again.
All again.
Okay.
And make it as simple as possible.
I will simplify it.
Yes. Because we understand it, but, you know, my mother may not.
All right.
So, I assume that you're probably the mastermind behind this, right?
It
You
was
put this
a,
together?
it was a
You joined
collaboration.
Okay. I will say, so this fall will be my 12th time saying a tax rate. This is the first time out of all the previous 11 that looking at some pieces of paper, just reading them, it makes sense.
I just gave you 3 summary pages.
Yes.
So,
And so, I mean, I say that to say, I mean, this is great pieces of material that put it in a very simple, let's put it down where the chickens can peck at it type of conversation. So, appreciate your work on it.
Okay. Working budget.
So just that.
We just did that. Okay, next is Kevin Mattingly is going to present the district facility plan update.
Well, we're actually just going to let you know that we're going to start discussions on this district facility plan that y'all approved. And we'll come back to you in October with what we've decided and whether we're going to use general funds or capital.
It's in two specific projects, our Nelson County High School and Area Technology Center entrances. And really, Kevin and the team are going to be able to evaluate, does it make sense in terms of the potential cost to use general fund or capital fund?
Right.
And really, we feel like at Nelson County High School, it's going to be a much larger discussion because of the facade of that building. Whereas at the Area Technology Center, it might be a pretty straightforward decision. So our goal is to come back in October and to present some ideas around, here are some options we have. Here's potential cost estimates without real formalized estimates. We can at least say in the ballpark. So we give a sense of direction around where we want to go with it.
I remember Chief McCoy back 5 months ago. Remember he talked with us about a grant he was going after, but he wouldn't talk about the details for obvious reasons. Yeah, is some of that, because I noticed that the two items that are listed
There'll be some
first on
safety and
here.
security things that we
Okay.
will do with that if he gets that grant.
Okay, so the two things may kind of play together, so.
I feel like the grant, the primary focus on the grant was around cameras.
Yeah.
Replacing
I
the
think
entire.
it was
Okay.
specific.
Right.
It wasn't just money to use, you're using on specific
Right,
things.
but it still may incorporate some because most of the time we have cameras on entrances, things like that. So if there's
Yeah, I think-
modifications to
I think our goal is
entrances.
to get a camera system that they're all the same.
Yep.
Everybody's got cameras that work. When we need footage, we can find footage, stuff like that. And if you know Nelson County High, how awkward it is to try to do something safety there, that's what Mr. Bradley's talking about on the challenges, that we'll come back with some ideas and some goals.
It's really just a matter of, do we want to create a new entrance right beside the current entrance?
Right.
Or do we want to alter the current entrance? And how might that disturb the hallway? That's something that
And how
we should be able to come back in October to have further discussion.
Any more questions? Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, under Innovate and Grow, we have Ms. Lee on grant application.
Okay, so we have opening on Monday in Kentucky, the 21st Century Community Learning Center grant programs. And so as a district, we're taking a look at those, and we're looking at potentially writing maybe two. And it's a very hefty grant. It's a 5-year grant, and it provides for after-school and summer learning programs for students. And these are some of the details on it. We'll just summarize that a bit. But essentially, the 21st Century grants have been in existence in Kentucky for over 20 years. Before they were at the state level, they were offered at the federal level. And about 110 districts have been served by these. There was one previously in Nelson County that served a multitude of schools, including Boston. And at one time, it served 4 schools, because when they were initially written and came out, there wasn't a cap on the number of schools. Now you serve 1 school with those grants. So the funding source on those is, it's through federal funds that allocate down to the state. And for years 1 through 3, it's $150,000 per year. Year 4 is $125,000, and year 5 is $100,000. And so it's primarily used around personnel, because you need a full-time site coordinator to handle the program and the systems. You employ you have to have 2 certified teachers per day, and then you can use student workers in the program and other staff. And so it's really a great option for families, and it provides, it's beyond just the homework help and tutoring that we often see, because it's very engaging, and there will oftentimes be like student clubs associated with that, and community partners. So there's a little bit of information about it.
Who will be the co-applicant?
And the schools that we apply for will identify their co-applicants. They'll work, and so we'll have an advisory group in each school who will develop what their program would look like, and that will go into the application.
What schools will be applying?
We have not made a final decision. We've offered that to our elementary schools and given them an opportunity to provide feedback based on if they think that they would benefit from it, if they can put the time and resources themselves for it.
What would be the criteria to even apply for?
One would be the 40%.
The 40%.
Yes.
So,
Yes, have to have a
Okay,
minimum of free and
okay.
reduced lunch rate of 40%.
Sorry, I don't have my glasses on.
Okay.
I'm trying to
Yeah, we read it
remember,
now.
Ms. Dye. I mean,
it was
Boston,
fantastic.
didn't they also have some evening programs, maybe like, I'm gonna use the phrase parenting hacks, but things to kind of help with families and how to, you
You're
know.
required to have 6 annual.
Okay, I was saying there was something like that, and I didn't know if you had seen or heard.
Yes, yeah, we
Okay.
went to all of them.
And you enjoyed those? You saw the value in them?
Well, I mean, it was, yeah, absolutely. It was, yeah. It was one of the reasons that we personally picked public schools. So,
It is a very, very hefty application.
yeah.
And it's a major time commitment, and it's very competitive. 100 to 150 schools will apply per year, and they'll typically fund it alternately.
So how do we win? That's the question, isn't it?
We'll be submitting applications, and I've written 17 successful applications in the past. There's no guarantee. It's competitive.
Out of how many?
Independent reviewers, 17 days.
So you got about a 98% success rate?
So, I would say
That's the winners.
that, you just don't know that, they have independent reviewers that they contract with and bring them in, so and we're in a different setting. That would be the
It
new.
sounds like you know the language and lingo and things to focus on.
Previously, so I'm hopeful, but that's why we write the applications.
We have to be careful to talk, we can't talk much about gifts, because they'll be, they might not understand fully. Is this their gift, is it our gift, is it excavating gifts?
And it's a very dry application, and you have to use the lingo that goes with it.
So you'll be the translator for our lingo.
So don't make a decision on this.
So that's the policy we're working to change.
No action be taken.
No action, no, I saw that on the.
So,
All
all right.
do you have any questions about these?
Okay, go for it.
Any help you need? Anything you need?
The schools will design what they want. We also had some other applications that were smaller, just for schools, and there was one that came in late this afternoon. I didn't even have a chance to read it, but those will be on your board meeting in 2 weeks. And these are the ones that are typically $200 to $300, just for local entities. So,
But it's money.
it's money. It is. It
So
is.
I think our schools that they have a vision for that. And that's key. They have a vision for how it fits into the student experience.
And then you have your second reading on policy, which is related to the general duties of the board. And that is, let's see. Yes, I was going to say, this part's not mine. This is the piece, I think it's on down further. Where is it? It's about grants, applications for grants. So what we're seeing is sometimes when grants are announced, they're maybe due in 30 days, and we may not even learn of those for 2 to 3 weeks. And so this was to give the superintendent permission to approve the grant submitting of application. It would still come before the board, but we certainly don't want to be in a situation where we can't apply for something because of the way this timeline's falling.
This is the second reading.
Yes, second reading on that.
So I'd make a motion to approve the second reading for policy 1.11 as presented.
Okay, do I have a second?
I'll second.
Okay, thank you. All in favor? Aye. All opposed? Motion carried.
Do we have the one for professional development in here too?
It's a procedure and one rating. It was a procedure, so it's
Okay. That's all. Thank you.
Thank you, thank you. Okay, next we have Tiffany, and and she's going to tell us about the BCBA and MSD consultant contract and Head Start utilization young people. Isn't it?
Yes. So BCBA is our board analyst that we contract with. We contracted with in years past, and same as the MSD consultant. She's a consultant that comes in and works with our teachers on classroom structures for our most severe students with disabilities. So those are both annual contracts, the same people we have in place for that. Dr. Kara Ackerman is the BCBA, and Dr. Spriggs from University, they're both from the University of Kentucky, are both the contracts on there. So I will present that to you guys next week for approval. Any questions on those two contracts? 2 weeks, sorry, the next board meeting.
So we need a motion?
No, not today.
At the board meeting.
Yep.
Okay, those decisions will be both be taken next.
Yes, ma'am. And then the next one is Head Start full utilization. So again, that's also an annual MOA that we sign with Head Start, and that basically says we have to fill their centers with a certain amount of students before we can open our preschool. And we did meet that number. I think it's 45. I think I asked last year what that number, how that number changes and what that means, but apparently until the state does a new audit on numbers, that stays at 45. But what I was told is that's a pretty low number for Nelson County, so we might want to just be happy with that. So we'll see.
Be happy with that.
Yeah, because I was just asking, like, what does this look like? Because parents have to agree to go to Head Start versus our preschool, and we have to work in conjunction with them on different processes. So, but we met for utilization.
Talking on this topic, while it's not specifically about the Head Start agreement, do we know, like, roughly what our numbers at our early learning center look like this year, enrollment numbers? Is it up, flat, down?
It is, we're up. We have waiting lists for students who don't currently qualify. So yes, we've seen, and across the state, I was talking to Chase about this too, across the state, they've seen a huge increase in preschools and servicing kids. And we're not completely funded from the state yet on that, so that's up this year too, I think.
Well, of course, like you just said, I mean, the first 45, it sounds like, automatically go to Head Start.
That qualify for their services
Yes.
and parents agree, yes.
And then after that, then we can start taking, so it sounds like if we had even more room and these parents that did not qualify, were interested in paying the tuition, we'd be filling more slots in.
I feel pretty confident in this, yeah, in that, yes.
Which is a positive, other than the fact that now we're landlocked there.
From what I understand, yes.
There's always more land.
There's always more land, but there becomes the challenge, yeah. Okay.
Any question on that? And again, that's just an MOA, and we'll get that.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, next item, student and shareholder engagement. And that would be, do we have any guests that would like to say something? If you do, I don't see any guests. So with that being said, do I hear a motion to adjourn this meeting? Thank you, Mr. Dixon. Second? Second. Thank you. All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Dismissed.